the general understanding, and I should really call it the general misunderstanding, was that autistic people lack empathy. That's a very simplified and incorrect view. Many autistic individuals might have challenges with interpreting their body's own internal signals. They might be actually have a lot of high physiological indicators of pain, but may be reporting very little pain, or the other way around. But that basically shows that the explicit and the implicit processes are not tightly coupled. There is something in the electromagnetic spectrum or light, which is called the wave-particle duality. That light is both a continuous wave and as well as chunks of distinct photons. So I think of autism like that yes, it is a continuous dimension, but I think there are distinct subtypes that make up that continuous distribution. It's the level of granularity at which we are looking at.
Yeah. So hello everyone and welcome back to the India Autism Center podcast. This is your space where we amplify voices of innovation, inclusive thinking. And today we have with us Professor Bhismadev Chakrabarti. He's a leading neuroscientist and autism researcher with over 2 decades of experience in the work of studying developmental patterns for young adults. He's a professor of neuroscience and mental health and research director of Center for Autism at the University of Reading. He's also the principal research advisor at the India Autism Center. Bhishma, it's so lovely to have you. I feel like I haven't seen your face in ages, so thank you for coming to Calcutta, even though it was, for a reason, unexpected. But thank you.
Thank you, Saki. It's lovely to be back as always.
So this is probably a question you get always. For someone new to your work, how do you really explain to them what you're really doing?
So I think the best way that I have come up with to make sense of my work to other people is that I work on how people understand and respond to emotions.
Okay.
So when we're looking at emotion signals right from the point we are born, and we are responding to them, whether it is the mother's or the father's smile, or whether it is emotions on a playground, whether it is managing our own emotions. Emotions are everywhere, and we are constantly responding to others' emotions, recognizing them, managing our own emotions. So my research focuses on how we understand and respond to emotions, both others and one's own.
Why is that important with autism and developmental delays, really, the work of emotions?
One of the things that many autistic individuals face challenges with, and those who are able to express themselves verbally, they have confirmed in their self-reports as well, is a lot of difficulties and challenges with understanding subtle emotional signals or even managing one's own emotions. So this seems to be a rather important area in which many autistic individuals face challenges, and hence it's relevant to study emotions in the context of autism.
So when this research is conducted, what methods do you employ to conduct your research and your study of emotions, really?
There is no one method to study emotions, because no matter what technique I use, I will never be able to get at the subjectivity of your emotion. So suppose you tell me that, oh, Bhishma, I'm in pain right now. I can plug you up to 100 different instruments, but I cannot prove or disprove that you are in pain. Because the feeling of it is very subjective. However, before the feeling emerges, there are quite a lot of physiological processes that we can track using various neuroscience techniques. Some techniques would be using psychophysiology, like skin conductance and heart rate monitoring. There can be brain activity monitoring using functional MRI or as well as EEG. There are also simple experiments that involve the use of eye trackers to capture the pupil diameter. So there are various indices that we can measure that capture different elements of the physiological changes that accompany emotion. But it's important to realize that these are just elements that contribute to the eventual feeling of a certain emotion, and we'll never be able to measure feeling per se.
So that's interesting. So let's say if I feel pain a certain way, and you would like to measure the pain that someone else feels, are you saying that physiologically? I mean, and let's say if the nurse was to ask me on a scale of 10, how much pain are you feeling? And I would say 6, and the same person would say 6, right? And maybe we have, the same injury, and you were to plug me up with devices and plug that person up with devices. So are you saying that physiologically there would still be changes in terms of how that person is feeling pain?
You're spot on. So what you have captured is exactly this decoupling between the physiological indicators related to an emotion state and the subjective report of that emotion state. And these two things are not very tightly coupled. It might be, to take your example, it might be that my physiological indicator on whatever instrument I'm measuring is a 5, but I have reported self-reported pain of 7. And you have the same physiological indicator of 5, but you are reporting a 5.
Right.
So that means your self-report is much more aligned with the physiological state than mine. I'm actually over-reporting.
Right.
So in that case, and one of the things that has been noticed increasingly in the literature is that autistic individuals often show a decoupling between the level of physiological indicators and their self-report. And this has been kind of, this direction of research is particularly focusing on the process of interoception, that how we respond to our own body's internal signals. And there's a theory, emerging theory, that suggests that many autistic individuals might have challenges with interpreting the body's own internal signals. They might actually have a lot of high physiological indicators of pain, but maybe reporting very little pain, or the other way around. But that basically shows that the explicit and the implicit processes are not tightly coupled.
So you said introspection and
Interoception.
Interoception, and there's another one called
Proprioception. Yeah.
What is that, Bhishma?
So proprioception is our own sensation from the stretches of our various muscles and skin, but that we can feel that, when I'm looking at you and smiling, I know that I'm stretching my lip corners, even though I can't see them. And I know this because of proprioception. This is proprioceptors giving the information to my brain. Whereas interoception is something is a signal that's coming from internal organs. Like if I feel that I'm slightly uneasy in my tummy, or the butterflies in my tummy. Now there isn't a muscle receptor there that is sending me information or in that sense,
Correct.
But that internal bodily signal is interoception.
And would intuition be anywhere falling in this category?
Intuition is, I think, a far bigger word in that sense, because intuition is, you could think of it as some kind of a predictive ability. That, if I say that I have an intuition that you are going to ask this question.
Yeah.
So that, if you unpack that, that would essentially mean that based on our previous conversation, I'm able to predict what's coming next. So that predictive ability is a much bigger construct in how we perceive the world and respond to it. But yeah, I wouldn't put it in line with interoception or introspection.
It's not there. It's
not quite there.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. And Proprioception is something that is also studied when you study emotions.
That's right.
So, because I've actually heard this, there's a friend of mine who recently got her diagnosis, and she said, I've always felt, because you mentioned smiling, I've always felt that when I smile, my lips move a certain way, and I get very conscious of that. And then I feel very nervous of just the whole eye contact and the smiling aspect of it. So I'm just curious to know how proprioception ties into the work that you do with emotions. Is it just understanding the muscles and?
Yes, I mean, at the end of the day, like what I was mentioning to you about this decoupling between the physiological indicators of emotion and the explicit labeling of an emotion or understanding of the internal state and putting a certain kind of value to it or a label to it. It relates to the question that you just posed. If I am unable to assess how much my lip corners are stretched, are they stretched a bit too much when I'm smiling, or maybe they are not stretching at all? In that case, I would not be able to judge. And that would kind of then entail a chain of thought that would say, well, am I doing it too much or am I doing it too little? And that creates confusion. And of course, if I'm paying attention to try to work this out, that, okay, maybe this is not just enough of amount of lip stretch, that takes my kind of attention away from the next person. So I might actually miss important things that important signals, emotional signals or verbal signals that might be coming from the next person. So I think I can see how proprioceptive and interoceptive difficulties, or when I say difficulties, it's being able to assess or calibrate can lead to other difficulties in social communication, even though proprioception and interoception are essentially all that's happening within your body. It's not to do with other people.
So when you're studying emotions related, you're studying emotions with just the general population, or is it just specifically to individuals with autism?
So I do both. The way I think about autism is it is certainly not a unique group of individuals and then all non-autistics are on the other side of a clear binary. The way I think of it, of autism, is that we have a series of bell curves. And you could imagine emotion understanding or emotion regulation as one of these bell curves. Some people will be extremely good at reading emotions. Some people would be absolutely...
How good are you?
Actually pretty bad. Actually very bad, to be honest. They say research is me search. So, it's something I have struggled with, and so I work on it.
Do people ask you to face read them sometimes?
People ask all kinds of things, but they take you seriously if you say that I research on this.
Yeah.
They usually never ask me how good are you personally.
Yeah.
That's always a difficult thing for me.
So you were saying that autism is a set of bell curves.
Yeah, so you can imagine this emotion regulation or emotion recognition as a bell curve.
Okay.
Some people are really good at it, some people are terrible at it. And then you can imagine sensory sensitivity is another bell curve. Some people will have really high sensitivity to very small things. Some people will have very low sensitivity to things. Then there are motor patterns of behavior. So each of these dimensions is for simplicity, you can think of these as bell curves. And when these bell curves overlay one on top of the other, one kind of segment, you will have much higher population of a much higher prevalence of autistic individuals in there. Because if you end up on the end of the bell curves, that gives you high sensory sensitivity and high difficulties with emotion regulation and specific motor patterns, you might end up with autism. But autism per se is not a binary thing that's just different from everything else.
Yeah.
It sits within a much wider landscape of human variation. And we need to understand each of these dimensions of human variation.
So Bhishma, with the work that you do with emotions, what are some interesting things that you found over the course of the years that you've worked on this?
So one of the things that we have been kind of studying for a while is is empathy and how people understand other people's emotions. And when we started this work, the general understanding, and I should really call it the general misunderstanding, was that autistic people lack empathy. That's a very simplified and incorrect view of autistic autistic functioning per se. So we were looking into the biology of empathy and also factors that that influence empathy. Now, what we found over kind of several studies with EEG, fMRI, functional electromyography, and a bunch of other techniques, we found that we should not really treat empathy as a fixed trait, as a fixed construct. That it's not like height, that, you know, my height is going to be my height, irrespective of whether I'm in a hot room or a cold room in England or in here. Whereas the level to which I can empathize and understand and respond to other people's emotion, that will be very different depending on what context I'm in. If you are my best friend, I'll empathize with you in a different way compared to if somebody is a complete stranger. Now, one of the interesting and unexpected things that we found was that empathy, you could kind of, I call it the thermostat model of empathy, that you can turn up or turn down empathy based on how rewarding the other person is. Like, if you are my best friend, you are a very rewarding person to me, then I turn up my empathy dial. And if my mortal enemy comes next to me, and then I'll possibly turn down that dial of empathy. What we found over a number of studies that in autistic individuals, this thermostat is not that flexible. It's not that autistic individuals do not empathize. It is that they do not usually calibrate the empathy based on other people. So it's almost treating
everyone
as
same,
as egalitarianly as possible. So, which of course creates problems because it becomes context inappropriate in many ways. But that was a very interesting insight that came from our studies.
That's a study that of course is it ongoing, or is it already?
This is about 5 or 6 different studies. These have been completed. Yeah.
Oh wow! Yeah. Vishnu, have you watched Inside Out?
I have indeed, yes.
What are your thoughts on that? I'm just
I love
curious.
it. I teach about it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Which one do you like the most? The Inside Out, did you watch the second one?
I have, actually.
And what are your thoughts on that? I'm just curious.
I love all of the characters, but I'm yet to kind of digest ennui.
Okay.
I'm yet to digest ennui because that's the in classical emotion theory, Ekman and Izzard and the great gods of emotion research, nobody really talks about ennui as such.
Can you explain what that is for
ennui is, I think the simplest one is boredom or listlessness. I mean, you see it in
Bengalis do that best, right?
Well, or adolescents.
Yeah.
No, but Bengalis have this thing
I'm going to get cancelled for this, but maybe, no, but like lad is that's right?
Perfect.
Isn't lad?
Lad, I've never really thought about it. Whether lad and ennui. Lad, I would say, is kind of
it's not exactly lazy, it's almost intentional.
Yeah, and ennui lacks intention. I think that's where lad is kind of active lazing.
Yeah. And like you're doing this.
Yeah. I'm doing it for a reason. Ennui is, I just don't know what to do, so I'm doom scrolling. That's ennui. And whatevs.
Yeah.
I think that word, whatevs, captures ennui. It's like, I don't really care. Lad, people really are very serious about. So
what I really liked about Inside Out, I remember watching the first one and bawling my eyes out, of course.
I love it.
Yeah. And every time I watch it, it just so happens, is when we think of emotions, we really just think of them as not fluid. And towards the end of it, when there were these magic balls that were coming out, there was just this group of vibgyor almost, which is the emotional granularity that people possess, right? Like it doesn't have to just be disgust. It could be disgust and love. Like I could love putting I could love jumping into a puddle, and it could be a little bit of happiness and disgust. I want to ask you about emotional granularity and about people with autism. I'm always confused about that myself because sometimes I forget that there are emotions that are so granular. And only when I read maybe a book of fiction do I remember, oh, yeah, this kind of exists, this feeling. I've probably felt this when I was 12. Do autistics have this emotion, or has this come up in your studies? I mean, I know with the little bit I've interacted with people that this has been a struggle for them. But I'd like to hear from you.
So first of all, I think autistic people themselves are the best people to tell you about the subjective experience of different emotions, the feelings. So I will not try to put words in their mouth or speak for them. But from what I know as an emotion researcher who is non-autistic, and I think this whole idea of labeling emotions is rather unnatural if you think about it. When we interact in our daily lives, we are not constantly telling ourselves, there's not a small voice next to my ear saying, oh, now you're happy, now you're a little bit nervous, and now you're angry. No, you just be.
Yeah.
Right? So we are not labeling.
But you are labeling my emotions.
Only if I'm asked to.
Right.
So this is the difficulty of being an emotion researcher, that our paradigms are not really ecologically very strong. Because even when you are talking with your friends, do you ever have to label that, oh, I think he is angry and a little bit sad? No, that just doesn't happen. So more ecological paradigms would be where you don't ask anybody about labeling a specific emotion, because labeling is somewhat unnatural as an activity.
Yeah.
Labeling others' emotions, labeling your own emotions, and which is why I mean, one of the most difficult questions for me, and I can imagine for many autistic people as well, is when somebody asks you, what are you feeling right now? Tell me what you're feeling. And it's a very difficult question. I don't know what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
So it's like saying, what are you smelling right now? So, you don't have words for those things.
Yeah. So I've taken therapy a couple of times, and every time that I've been asked that, I'm just like, I don't quite know what I am feeling. And that exercise in itself is so interesting to do, because it takes a lot mentally to put a label to what I'm feeling.
Exactly. And how do you actually go through that process? You kind of take yourself out of your own body and be an observer. And then you are relying on effectively physiological signals that I see that my heart is pounding, or I'm not sitting up straight, or my hands are sweating. I must be nervous. So, I mean, it's effectively, even when we are trying to self-report on our own emotions, or the signals that are available to us are still very physiological and interoceptive, effectively, interoceptive and exteroceptive.
So among your current projects that you have, Bhishma, which line of basically autism research excites you most, and why?
So one of the lines of work that we have been doing is a very applied line of work. So, of course, the work on empathy and emotion regulation, that's kind of our fundamental lab-based work, and that's ongoing. And
that's what the Center for Autism at Reading is focused on.
That's right. That's the work that we are doing there. But also, over the last decade, more than almost a decade and a half now, we have been working to develop large-scale phenotyping tools, or how to assess autism in large-scale settings, such as...
What is phenotype exactly?
Phenotyping is measuring the behavioral manifestations of autism. How do autistic children behave? What are the behavioral indicators? How do we measure? How do we assess autism?
Right.
And we have been doing quite a lot of work in India, and now also recently in Malawi, trying to develop tools to assess autism. So we did about a decade ago, we did the first study of autism prevalence in Indian school children, where we studied about 12,000 children from in and around Kolkata, with tools that we had validated here, and we found how many school-going children might meet criteria for autism. And that work was done with paper and pencil questionnaires, and it was rather hard because it also meant that clinically trained psychologists would be doing the assessments. It just didn't scale very well. But
12,000 is a huge number.
Yeah,
wow.
That was a big study. Yeah. But then,
that's the one with Shanil.
That's the one with Shanil,
nice.
yes.
Yeah, shout out to Shanil.
That's right, yes. And then we had, so we moved to creating a digital platform for assessing autistic behavior, different aspects of autistic behavior. About 10 years ago now, we started doing that work. This is work in collaboration with Sangat in Delhi and Goa. And there we created a platform and did a proof of principle study in children with autism and intellectual disability, and children without either of these conditions. Sorry, that was children with intellectual disability and no autism. So we had 3 groups.
Okay.
Autism, intellectual disability, and no autism, and neurotypicals.
So 4 groups. No, autism is neurotypical.
No autism, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So then we tested with this platform, and we used, so the platform has got games within it that children can play, and it can be administered by non-specialists. So we had school dropouts who, with minimal training,
who could do this,
administering these.
And what's the name of the platform?
The platform is called Start.
And this is available?
It is available from the website, but it is not available on the App Store.
Okay.
Because one of the things that we have been very careful about is we don't want people to start diagnosing themselves and worrying themselves if they have not gone through the appropriate training to administer the platform. But what we are really keen on is to make this platform widely available to health systems or either government health systems or clinics, so that we can do large-scale assessment, autism-related assessment in the community without the need for specialist psychologists or psychiatrists seeing every child. And we can kind of flag up any children who meet.
So the main goal of Start is to make assessment more accessible.
That's right.
And this has been based out of the work that you've done for a decade.
That's right. Yes.
And it's available online.
That's right. It's an open source code base. We have released the code base already. And right now we are looking for people to take it up, because, I mean, we are a research lab.
Right.
We are not in the business of scaling it up to health systems and but we are now looking for partners who would take it and administer it or kind of put it in the health system.
I'm going to link this up in the description, the Start.
Please do, yes.
The Start website, right?
Yeah.
But there's a caveat here. You said that nobody can really take this if they've not
They have not got the training, but we have got all the training materials, which we will be happy to share.
Okay.
It's when I say that nobody can download it from the App Store and start administering it themselves, it's kind of a safeguarding thing for us, that we don't want to create panic amongst users to saying that, oh, my child is autistic because he couldn't play this game. But we want some level of gatekeeping and some level of training for those who are administering it.
Correct.
And so if it is a government health system or a clinic, then we can make sure that here is the training material, make sure that the people who will be administering it they get trained on this before they administer it.
So, which is really interesting, because usually most of the assessments that clinical psychologists do for autism, doesn't it take like hours and hours?
That is true. Now,
does this also take that same
No. This takes about half an hour.
Okay.
And the important thing to realize is that this is not going to be a confirmatory diagnosis of autism.
That's what I wanted to know. Yeah.
This is meant to be scalable.
Right.
So It's going to, so our using the full start battery, we found that the start battery was 86% accurate in discriminating autistic from non-autistic neurotypical children. But if you had a 3-group classification, autistic, intellectually disabled, and neurotypicals, then the classification accuracy fell to 78%. That kind of discriminates between ID without ASD and ID and ASD per se.
So this reduces the job of a clinical psychologist, so to speak, but this is not a alternative.
Yeah, so we definitely are not suggesting that replace the clinical psychologist with this, but this is, I mean, we are dealing with a situation that, there are about 5,000 or 6,000 clinical psychologists in a country of 1.3 billion. So we are in a desperate shortage. We have desperate shortage of staff to assess. Whereas there are health workers and Anganwadi workers, the workers that are the ASHA workers who often help with the polio drops.
Correct.
They could be trained to administer this, and then this can scale up quite easily.
That's really interesting, and
hopeful.
I know I'm going to link this up, and I'm pretty sure that there'd be so many maybe small schools or tiny hospitals that are really struggling to make ends meet.
I'd be very happy to kind of talk through them, and we are now creating. So right now the app that was published, we have published on that, is an offline app, but now we are creating a web version of it so that it has a slightly longer shelf life. Because when you build apps, one of the things that we didn't realize when we were building it is that operating systems and devices, they keep improving. So unless you keep building new apps every few years, then it doesn't work. So whereas if you build a web app, then it lasts a little while longer. Not infinitely longer, but a little while longer.
So I have a question for you, which back to autism. So when you look at the latest autism research, are we moving closer to very clearly defined subtypes? Or is autism spectrum disorder better understood as a set of dimensions across the spectrum?
This is an excellent question, and one that troubles me and I guess many other autism researchers, because of course, initially when we started, the categorical model was very strong in the field, which is similar to the subtyping that you're talking about, that there are distinct subtypes within it. And we should also think of it that the categorical model also kind of assume that autism and non-autism are clearly different categories. So we saw that the data don't support that categorical model, that a dimensional model is more appropriate, that autistic features are distributed across the entire population. However, we do see that within people who have a diagnosis, it's not a completely continuous mix of dimensions. There are clusters that happen. So certain things co-occur.
By cluster, sorry, I'm interrupting. By cluster, do you mean that there are people with varying support needs?
Not so much the varying support needs. I mean that certain types of symptoms co-occur in the sense that you might have some gut-related symptoms and high sensory sensitivity, but not many social emotional difficulties. That might be one cluster of symptoms that co-occur quite a lot. And then you might have another group of autistic individuals who might have a lot of difficulty in social, emotional, and language aspects, whereas they do not really have that much sensory challenges on their day-to-day life. So it's not a continuous dimension. So and the more I think about it, I start thinking that both are kind of correct. That yes, there are dimensions, but the dimensional distribution is not uniform. It's not as if everybody, it's not a nice simple bell curve. It's possibly a little bit more complex. And if I have to take an analogy from high school physics, there is something in the electromagnetic spectrum or light, which is called the wave-particle duality. That light is both a continuous wave and as well as chunks of distinct photons. So I think of autism like that yes, it is a continuous dimension, but I think there are distinct subtypes that make up that continuous distribution. It's the level of granularity at which we are looking at.
Yeah. No, that's a great answer. So you've been involved with research in India, including your work at the IAC. And what strands of research in ASD are you exploring right now here in India?
So as I mentioned, the work, the broader work in India has been with these autism assessments, scalable assessments, digital assessments, and assessments that can be administered by non-specialists. So the work I mentioned about START, that then led to another piece of work which we have just finished, that's called STREAM, where we are doing not just autism-related phenotyping, but we are also measuring cognitive ability and also general motor functioning using tools that are built by other collaborators. And we have tested now 2,000 children in India and 2,000 in Malawi to look at how these children between 0 to 6 years old, how these children grow, how their cognitive skills grow, how their social skills grow, and how their motor skills grow in the first 6 years of life. And we are trying to map the developmental growth curves or reference curves of these skills. So we are now, the aim of this work that we have just finished collecting data for is that rather than try to say, here is an autistic child or here is a child with ADHD, we are now going to look at a child's position with reference to with their own population, on what percentile they are functioning at. So maybe a child is at 30th percentile of their cognitive functioning and 50th percentile of their motor functioning, and so on and so forth. And if the functioning is in cognitive, motor, or social domain falls below a certain threshold that we can decide based on available resources, then one can think about interventions. So rather than look for, let's diagnose or let's identify the autistic children first and then move them to autism-specific intervention, we're taking a dimensional view of it, saying that here is cognitive, just like you have height and weight growth charts. These are similar to those growth charts with cognitive, emotion, and socio-emotional and motor functioning. And the idea would be to see that if children are falling in the lower percentile curves of these reference curves, then they should be referred for eventual intervention. So this is neurodevelopmental phenotyping rather than autism phenotyping per se.
Bhishma, I want to talk about just research attitudes in general. In India, it takes a lot for us to get someone to just sit across the table and answer a few questions, or even if it's just play a few games. I think there's this fear that they're probably going to diagnose me. What exactly where do you see these research projects? Like, what does it help develop, really?
This is a beautiful question. Thank you. And this is something that I've faced for the last 2 decades. And the attitude to research is work in progress, and there is the only way to kind of improve that is through talking about our research and how it kind of influences practice and policy, and how it influences kind of the science of understanding autism more widely. Because one of the things, and this is something where there is also significant difference between the different countries that I've worked in. And one of the things that I've seen in the UK, that people are much more ready to take part in research, even though they know that there is not any direct immediate benefit to them.
Right.
And with young adults in research projects, we are able to provide them with like with a nominal kind of a thank you payment, or it's not supposed to be a kind of a salary or anything, but it's
Just an incentive.
Just an incentive. Whereas in India, you are not, the research ethics committees will not allow you to give any direct payment as such. So there are various rules and regulations.
Oh, it's different.
Yeah, so that kind of, because the incentives are very tightly controlled, it should not be perceived as something that is coercive. That, if I tell you that I'm going to give you 10,000 rupees and make you do very strange things, that's of course unethical. So that's an aspect, I think, which could be looked at in a bit more in a bit more depth, to make sure what's the level of incentive that would be not perceived as like a inordinate pressure. At the same time, if you don't give any incentive to the individual, then why would they participate? Now, specifically with respect to autistic individuals, it's even more difficult. That you can't really say that if you take part in our studies, you'll get 200 rupees. Nobody really cares about 200 rupees if the level of challenges you're dealing with is much, much bigger. So it's not monetary incentive that we're talking about. So, so the ways we have to think about is either organizing something like an awareness course about research and about good practices in day-to-day kind of life management that might help the particular individual kind of manage certain aspects of their life.
So funnily enough, we've found we've seen great initiation from smaller schools or people working with individuals on the spectrum, but the ones that have been challenging have actually been the neurotypicals, because they're just like, why do I belong in this? Like, you're looking at autism. I'm not autistic. I don't want to know if I'm autistic. So why is that subset really needed? Why are the neurotypicals really needed when you're only focusing on autism research?
So as I said, that, I don't particularly think that autistic individuals come from a different planet.
Right.
I think autism represents just one section of the human variation. And if neurotypicals are part of the human variation, they need to be studied. Like, if I have to map the entire distribution of emotional regulation abilities, I can't just study one end of it and say, oh, this is how it works. I need to study the entire distribution. So, of course, people without a diagnosis, people without a current diagnosis of anything are required. And in order to, the challenge there, of course, is how do you motivate them to take part in research? And that's where I think outreach programs like the ones you're leading are very, very vital, because this is not a change that's going to come overnight. It's not that suddenly people will say, oh, we'll all volunteer for research.
Yeah.
It's part of a nation's temperament. You have to have a scientific temperament. You have to know that, okay, I know that there are certain things that are not known about autism, that are not known about ADHD at this point, but maybe in 5 to 10 years' time, we will do a better job of it and it's an incremental, slow progress, and we just kind of do our small bets.
Yeah, it's just not linear, right? In any way.
Absolutely.
And how is, just interested to know, what is it like in Malawi, like with the research participation? Is it similar to that of India, or is it more?
So, interestingly, what we found in Malawi was that because we were collaborating with a group that has been working in Blantyre, which is the capital, is close to the capital city, and they have local networks. Everything works through local networks. If the people what does not work, I'll tell you what does not work, which should not work, is what's called parachute researchers. Parachute researchers are people who come from Western countries, collect data and run away.
That exists?
That exists a lot.
Okay.
That exists a lot. And those are the things that I find ethically, morally problematic. So if you're working in a country, then you have to be well invested and integrated into the local systems, and only then it's a question of trust, really. If the people trust you as somebody who's not out to kind of make a quick buck or kind of just take your time and kind of data and run away, then people will volunteer. So thankfully, the collaborators that we've been working with in Malawi are absolutely fantastic.
That's amazing. I want to talk to you about IAC's research. So what is the larger vision, Bhishma?
So IAC is an absolutely exciting thing, possibly the most exciting thing that has happened to autism in India for a long time. And I can only speak for the last 2 decades that I have been seeing the autism space in India, but conflict of interest because I am very much part of the IAC family. But having said that, my vision for IAC research is to create a longitudinal data bank for autism in India that is locally tailored. And this data bank is something that will not have an immediate outcome as such. But we do not know how autistic individuals grow old effectively.
Right.
And for that, we need regular sets of data from the same sets of individuals, and that's well embedded within not just a single 3-year research study, but something that is a rolling.
Vishwa, why does that matter? Longitudinal research.
Longitudinal research matters because human lives are not linear things.
Okay.
It's not that you say, for example, your height. If we just took the first 6 years of your life, your height would be growing right nicely and linearly, and then it stops growing.
It actually did stop though. but yeah.
There you go. So
that's interesting research too.
So right now when we do autism research, we look at just mostly it's snapshot in a single time point, or maybe 2 or 3 time points over a 1-year period. But life is a longer time scale.
Yeah.
And we do not know these social skills, motor skills, sensory behaviors, emotion regulation. How do they evolve? Do they get worse? Do they plateau? Do they get better? And these things need to be studied.
I want to chime in here because I have a bone to pick about the disability certificate, which is interesting because you mentioned longitudinal data. So the disability certificate, once you get the certificate, it gives you a percentage, and that percentage stays the same. Now, if you get 100%, or let's say you get a 60%, but it could get worse or it could get better over time.
Exactly.
So is that what it is, really? It's what you're basically studying. There's no research on this, really.
Exactly. And you don't need to think about autism. Just think of non-autistic, as typical, as neurotypical as you can imagine. An adult, when they were, imagine them at the age of 6, imagine them at the age of 60, and imagine them at the age of 80. They are going to be very different in how well their cognitive functions are, their motor functions are, their social emotional functions are.
Yeah.
And we do not know whether the same patterns of neuronal growth or synaptic proliferation and then synaptic death, whether those patterns are identical in autistic individuals or not. Or maybe some sets of symptoms become greater, some sets of symptoms become worse. In this context, one of the recent studies with the IAC becomes particularly relevant because we were looking at Parkinson's disease.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah, so Parkinson's disease is typically associated with the older age range, whereas autism is typically associated with the younger, early onset condition, right? So, but we know for a while now that autistic individuals are up to 3 times more likely to develop Parkinson-related symptoms when they grow older. And we wanted to ask whether it's the same if you ask the question from the other side. If you have a Parkinson's disease condition, are you likely to have higher autistic features? And to my knowledge, we have done the biggest study in the world on this.
Yeah.
And the answer is very unequivocally clear
Yes.
that yes, if you have Parkinson's, you will have higher autistic features. But then we got a nuance that we were not expecting, that if you are male and Parkinson's, then you have the highest autistic level of autistic features. If you have male and you have a non-Parkinsonian motor condition, then you have slightly lower autistic features. And if you have no motor condition whatsoever, but you're age matched, then you have the lowest amount of autistic traits. In females, this difference is not there at all.
Wow.
So
Okay.
we were not expecting a sex difference here because, we thought of autism as kind of one thing, but it
Right.
clearly is not. Females, whether you have Parkinson's or you don't have Parkinson's or you have other motor disorders, you have the same level of autistic traits, so very similar levels.
This, I know this paper is published, and I'm also going to link this up in the description for people to read it. I didn't know about this nuance, so that's interesting.
We were not expecting. It came as a, and we mentioned it in the paper that, this is not hypothesized, but here it is the data. The data is the data.
So, Bhishma, when I asked you about the vision, you mentioned longitudinal and you mentioned locally tailored. Why does locally tailored matter to you?
Locally tailored matters in multiple different ways, and it's not just DEI considerations. It's not just being woke.
Okay.
Locally tailored matters because social rules are different, environment is different, languages are different, and family structures often are different. So it is not for checking any box or appearing politically correct. It is fundamentally different things that we deal with. Of course, it doesn't mean that it's completely different and there's no commonality between the cultures, but there are enough differences between cultures. The health systems are different. So the way an autistic person's journey would go through, would be in the UK versus in India would be very different. I mean, if you just take into consideration, like about 80% of children with an autism diagnosis in the UK, they go to a mainstream school.
Right. Yeah.
In India, 80% of children with or a diagnosis of autism either go to a special school or don't go to any school.
Any school.
So because the level of functioning at which parents would go and seek a diagnosis of autism is significantly lower here before somebody would go and seek a diagnosis of autism.
Anywhere else.
Whereas compared to the US or the UK.
So longitudinal study, locally tailored, is how do you see IAC contributing to the future scope of research, autism research in India?
Right. So I think there are research questions that are directly relevant to India. And in fact, one of the first studies that we did was this nationwide priority scoping exercise.
Right.
That we asked the autism community in India to say what the key priorities for research, interventions, and skills are, and then we use that as kind of a guiding light to plan what are the areas that we want to focus our research on. And those areas might not be identical to the areas identified in other setups, and that's not because of biological reasons, but it is because of different socioeconomic realities.
So the research ecosystem that we've been talking about, that's going to be at Samavesh, at the IAC campus, and will also kind of be the soul of what we do at India Autism Center. What does that look like, Bhishma?
So the way I think about it is there would be different strands to that the IAC research team or the IAC research enterprise. One strand would be the continuous strand of collecting data, systematic data using robust gold standard tools over time. And then over time, say with 5-10 years worth of data, which also combines the data from the clinical, coming in from the clinical team, we would be able to better map the trajectories, that if these are the indicators of specific individuals, this is what these individuals are responding best to in terms of their clinical outcomes, then that can help us plan the clinical or the support systems better. So that's the long-term vision of how this kind of relentless data collection over the next decades
It's going to look like.
that's what's going to that's what it's going to look like. And you mentioned the advances with machine learning and AI. These are only going to get better. So, but these techniques, no matter how big your or how wonderfully powerful your algorithms are, you need data. And we need good data to feed into those engines to get better predictive models.
Yeah.
That's that's going to be the continuous thread. But in addition to that continuous thread of research, we would also have different innovative research projects to work at, say, different potential markers or phenotypic markers of autism, or there might be different interventions, because there are also innovations in the intervention space, and a lot of people would come and claim, try this intervention, this is the magic that does this or that. Our job at IAC would be to, once the clinical team has assured about the safety and the feasibility of an intervention, the research team would be looking at kind of collecting robust evidence to check whether the claimed benefits of any new interventions are indeed borne out by the data or not. So we have an evidence-based approach to trying new interventions.
Thank you so much, Bhishma. That brings us to the end of this talk, really. I'm really excited for what lies ahead at IAC Research. And if you are as well, please consider liking and sharing and subscribing, because it helps us go a really, really long way to get professionals like Bhishma right across the table. And also, if you have any comments for Bhishma, do leave it in the comments below and we'll try to get it answered by him. Thank you so much. And until next time, also do consider watching any of the other videos that are popping up on your screen. Thanks again.